Today, let's show some respect to the great mother of Mount Olympus, Rhea, who was, in fact, not an Olympian, so you may not be aware of her despite her genealogical importance. Greek mythology spans generations of gods and their offsprings, and the ones you are most familiar with, like Zeus and Hera, are actually the third generation. Before Hera ruled supreme as queen of the gods, there was her Titan mother, Rhea. And before Rhea was queen, there was her divine primordial mother, Gaia. Rhea and Gaia had eerily similar fates. Both prioritized their children and enabled them to rise up against their cruel, smothering fathers, and as a result, ensured their own obsolescence within the hierarchy of the gods. To better understand Rhea's complicated family tree, let's start at the beginning. Unlike Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the ancient Greeks did not believe their pantheon of gods created the universe. For them, it was the reverse. The universe created their gods. According to Hesiod, who detailed a history of the Greek gods in his epic poem Theogony, at the beginning there was only a great amorphous mass called chaos, and out of the void the primordial gods of heaven and earth were formed. You may think of them generationally as the grandparents of the Olympic gods. Their children, whether by incestuous unions or by immaculate conception, were generally the parents, aunts, and uncles of the Olympic gods, though at times the Greek pantheon of deities paid no mind to intergenerational relations. Of the primordial gods, first there was Eros, the spirit of love, the force of attraction, the entity that bound all of nature together. Then there was Gaia, the expansive, nurturing earth, who spontaneously gave birth to three male deities: Uranus, the starry sky that wrapped around her; Urus, the mountains; and Pontus, who was the sea itself. After that came Tartarus, the great hellish pit beneath the earth. Next there was Erebos, the darkness associated with the underworld, followed by his wife, Nyx, the night. Their union would spawn their opposites, Ether, a god of light and the ether of the heavens, as well as Hemera, the day. Nyx also spontaneously brought forth several of her own offspring, including the Fates, who had the power to assign humans lifespans, Nemesis, who, for all of the vengeance and pain she caused, actually maintained universal equilibrium, as well as Doom, Death, Sleep, and Dreams. Rhea's parents, Uranus and Gaia, became equal partners, despite the fact that the Earth goddess had spawned him, largely because of their physical placement. They yielded 18 children, 6 female titans, 6 male titans, 3 cyclopses, giants with only one eye, and the Hecatoncheires, monsters with 100 hands and 50 heads. Due to their colossal size and incomparable power, the Titans, sometimes referred to as the Elder Gods, were the highest beings in the universe for untold ages. They were also the first gods to behave and look more like humans, while still personifying the primary forces of nature. And while a few Titans were associated with civilization and order, on the whole, the group was associated with the wild, often more destructive forces of nature. Most of the Titans paired off as couples. First, there were Okeanos, the ruler and namesake of the great river the ancient Greeks believed circled the earth. Tethys was his wife, and together these Titans ruled over all freshwater sources. Their children included rivers, the nymphs who presided over springs, and clouds. Next was Hyperion, a god of heavenly sunlight, and Thea, a goddess of light, but particularly shimmering, shining light, so she was associated with gemstones. Their children included the sun, the moon, and the dawn. Following them were Chios, the Titan god of questions and inquiries, and Phoebe, the Titan goddess of intellect and bright minds. Then there was Iapetos, whose translated name, the Piercer, alluded to human wounds and mortality, and Themis, the Titan goddess of divine law and order. Notably, their children, Atlas and Prometheus, were the creators and saviors of humankind, the former carrying their world upon his shoulders, the latter giving them fire at the cost of his eternal torture and torment. After that was Krios, the god of starry constellations, who was not married to a Titan but to a sea goddess. And then there was Mnemosyne, the Titan goddess of memory who created language. Lastly, there were Kronos, the god of time and ultimately king of the Titans, and Rhea, the goddess we are focusing on today, an earth goddess like her own mother and mother herself to the Olympian gods who would usurp the Titans' rule. Like most revolutionary coups, it began with oppression, especially of Gaia, Rhea, and their children. First by Uranus, who had sent Gaia's 6 monstrous children to Tartarus. Enraged, she told her son Kronos how to overthrow him. He castrated his father with a scythe, and Rhea ascended to the highest throne alongside her brother, the new Titan king. But after deposing his father, Kronos became obsessed with power, and due to a prophecy that he would be toppled by one of his children, as he and Rhea began to procreate, he swallowed each newborn whole. After losing her first 4 children, Hestia, Hera, Demeter, and Hades, she was unwilling to give up a 5th child to the pits of Kronos' stomach. Like her mother before her, Rhea could not sit on the throne comfortably at the expense of her children's well-being. Another great earth goddess choosing to secede her own power to save her children. Rhea called upon Gaia to help her, and they managed to hide her next 2 children, Poseidon and Zeus, by stealing them away just after they were born and presenting Kronos with objects wrapped in a blanket. When Zeus and Poseidon were grown and ready to take on their father, they freed their siblings from Kronos' stomach with a little help from the family matriarchs. The Olympians stood united for the first time to fight the Titans. In the decade-long war that ensued, the Olympians overtook the powerful Titans, but they needed to free their uncles, the Cyclops and hundred-handed monsters, to do so. A pleasing twist for Gaia, whose children were finally liberated, a feat she had not been able to achieve for countless eons. With Zeus on the throne, Hera became the queen of the gods of Mount Olympus. Unlike her mother and grandmother, she was hell-bent on keeping that title, though that is a saga for another time. However, another of Rhea's children, Demeter, would be the next earth goddess to inherit the archetypal trappings. She ruled over fertile lands and was a fiercely protective mother. Like Gaia and Rhea, she was forced to subvert the patriarchal hierarchy to save her daughter from a fate male gods decided without her consent, which is a story we've already told. But when Zeus and the Olympians took over, most of the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, and the few who were allowed to remain free were lowered in the hierarchy of the gods, including their own mother, Rhea. Despite her diminished status, rich-haired Rhea, as Hesiod called her, was worshipped across Italy, Greece, the Anatolian peninsula, and maybe even further east into Mesopotamia. Because of this, she had many names, including the Great Mother, the Mother of the Gods, Ops, Cybele, Agavistus, and Brimo. Rhea was not only associated with the earth, she was also a powerful goddess of fertility, creation, comfort, and motherhood. In fact, some scholars translate the origin of her name to mean flow or ease, referring to the eternal flow of time, the continual rebirth of new generations. It can refer to the physical flows associated with motherhood, including menstruation, the rupture of the amniotic sac during childbirth we refer to as water breaking, or even breast milk. Her name also relates to the feelings of comfort and ease that come with being protected by a mother. Rhea's worship likely dates further back than the classical Hellenistic-era culture ancient Greece is best remembered for today. Over time, various Mediterranean religions synthesized primitive mother gods to have the same function. These great mother of the gods were fertile and nurturing figures that made them natural earth goddesses. In Anatolia, or Asia Minor, which we now know as Turkey, Rhea was associated with Cybele, perhaps explaining why a few Anatolian and Greek myths split between Rhea and Demeter in the role of Cybele. In Asia Minor particularly, Rhea was one of the earliest and most revered gods. The Anatolian mountains were home to dangerous creatures Rhea was known to tame, including panthers and lions. The lion became one of her sacred symbols, alongside the oak tree, as both were prized for their strength. In many ancient depictions of the mother goddess, she was not necessarily beautiful, but she was regal, flanked by lions and wearing a large turret crown, shaped to allude to the protective walls around ancient cities. Her centers of worship were often located in caves throughout Anatolia's expansive mountain ranges. For this reason, some of her names are directly associated with these mountains, including Dindymene and Berecynthia, likely stemming from Mount Berecynthus and Mount Dindymus. Both were located in Phrygia, home to one of her most loyal religious cults. Phrygia was also the kingdom of her non-Olympian but still infamous children, the stepfather to the Minotaur, King Midas. According to legend, after Kronos was imprisoned, Rhea had several other children, including a coupling with Phrygian King Gordius, namesake of the hopelessly entangled Gordian knot, and father to the ancient king with the ultimate golden touch. Unlike Rhea's modest, matronly depictions, her cults of worship were known to be especially wild. This may be because in some myths, Rhea may have purified Dionysus in Phrygia, teaching him her gifts of fertility and cultivation. As the god of wine, theater, and spiritual ecstasy, Dionysus's religious festivals were legendary. The Bacchanalia, the wildest type of reverie, and elements may have made their way into rites celebrating the mother goddess as well. Her enthusiastic priests, known as the Corybandes, who were held in the highest esteem by society, often participated in rituals described as orgiastic. At night, they would gather with devotees in the Phrygian forests and mountains, carrying torches and sometimes wearing full armor, because in their fanatical excitement they may maim or wound each other. They would carry cymbals, horns, and pipes, and burst into delirious shrieks and songs, creating a cacophony of noises to perform their debaucherous, mystical dances in the darkness. Some scholars believe that this Anatolian region was the birthplace of Rhea's cults, which eventually established homes all across Greece, with temples devoted to her from Athens to Arcadia. However, some scholars believe her worship began in Crete due to the people's own special relationship with the goddess. This was the island where Rhea sent Zeus to protect him from his father in the origin myth. Crete's cults had similar practices, including a war dance in honor of the mother goddess, where they would clang their spears and shields to symbolically hide the noise of baby Zeus's cries from his cannibalistic father. One of Rhea's greatest sites of worship was actually in Pessinus. Her first temple there was believed to be erected by King Midas himself, who went on to make even larger temples devoted to her throughout his kingdom. However, this first grand temple was built at the foot of Mount Dindymen because, according to legend, Rhea's most ancient sanctuary was hidden in one of the mountain's caves. In this sacred cave, there were allegedly two miraculous relics. The first was a magical stone, fallen from heaven to earth and engraved with the goddess's image. The second was the tomb of Rhea's tragic lover, Attis. Attis was a young Phrygian shepherd. In some versions of the myth, he is immortal, while in others he is a minor god of vegetation. Regardless of his modest background, his astonishing beauty made him well known, catching the eye of the mother of the gods, who made him her consort. However, another woman had fallen for him, a princess of Pessinus, who he was betrothed to marry. Rhea felt betrayed by this infidelity, and Attis paid for it dearly. In one version, Rhea punishes Attis by driving him to madness, and in his frenzy, he castrates himself and dies. Later, there came to be a group of Roman priests, known as Galli, devoted to Rhea's worship, who were initiated into the priesthood by performing their own self-castration. In another telling of the myth, Rhea disrupts and terrorizes his wedding, forcing Attis to run to the forest, where he maims and castrates himself beneath a pine tree. The ground around the tree, soaked in his blood, erupted in blooming violets. Rhea regretted his fate and asked Zeus to restore him, and while he refused, he did ensure Attis's body would never decay. It is said this is how the pine tree, whose appearance is unchanging through all seasons, became associated with sadness and winter, while violets represented hope and spring. When the Titans fell, Rhea may have lost some of her influence, but she certainly didn't lose any of her power. If anything, the legacy of Earth goddesses has been one of the strongest spiritual themes in history. So, if you've ever wondered why we still equate feminine divinity when we speak of Mother Earth, you may not need to look much further than Rhea, her mother, her daughter, and the many important Earth goddesses that appear in religious mythologies on nearly every continent from all over the ancient world.